So a summary of the first ois. David the Melech is in Midbar Yehuda, fleeing Shol. Tzomoh Nafshi be'eretz Tziv oy b'liyomoyim came back Kodesh Chazisicha. So the ''tschek'' explains that this is the union of the Bali Tshuva, Haid and Tzadikim Gemurim, which comes dafke from the Eretz Tziv Oyev, desolate and thirsty land. It's there that the strong fire shall have its az, in the words of the ''tschek'' is found. But in the Kodesh Elyon, came by Kodesh Chazisicha, which is Tzadikim Gemurim, so this shall have its az is not found. And then he went into detail to explain. We're talking about the Shechina, which is Sfiras HaMalchus, of Yitzira and Asiya, these two general levels which are put together. So on this level of the Shechina, which means also Neshamas Yisrael, as we explained. So this descends into the Midbar, the Ayin Sorim. That's what the Tzomoh Nafshi occurs. And then there was an Arichas why the ''tschek'' himself explains that why we're talking about Malchus of Yitzira and Asiya being mislabish in the Ayin Sorim, not Malchus of Bria, and how much more so, not Malchus Datzilus. That's because there cannot be any slapshus from those levels, because Bria is Rubei Toiv, Atzilus is completely Lo Yagur Chara, and from there cannot be slapshus in the Midbar Yehuda, the Ayin Sorim. It has to be as the Neshama, the Shechina, Malchus, three words for the same general inyan, descends to Yitzira and Asiya, and from there into Elam Hazeh in the Midbar of the Ayin Sorim. And it's there where Malchus Sheraglea Yerdis, as the pasuk says, that her feet descend to death. That pasuk in Mishlei, which Chassidus quotes frequently as a reference to Malchus. So it's there that is the Tzomoh Nafshi. So V'yesh Lekashas, that's a summary of the first ois. V'yesh Lekashas Ima Pirish HaPoshut. So we can connect this to the simple meaning of the pasuk. David Midbar Yehuda, as mentioned, David was in the Judean desert, fleeing Shaul, who sought his life. He thought, he was afraid he'd have to go even further. You'll have to leave Etzisol altogether. About which the pasuk says in Shmuel, describing the whole story. This is a pasuk in Tilim. Tzomoh Nafshi, Samach Gimel, the capital of the Rabbi, he began the Yitav Shechov Dalet. But the pasuk in Shmuel says, David the Melech said, he bemoaned the fact, Ki gershuni hayoim mistapach benachlas Hashem. They drove me today from being attached to the inheritance of Hashem, the Mishkan. Leimer leich lavid, go and serve avodah zarah. So the Gemara Kiddush said, Gemara, no one ever told him to serve avodah zarah. He was only afraid that he had to leave Eretz Yisrael. He's the famous Gemara, Kol Ador b'chutz ha'aretz. But whoever dwells outside Eretz Yisrael, doime is symbol analogous, Kimisha ein lelikah, one who has no God. So that's what he meant by leimer leich avodah zarah. That's what they told me. That's what they were compelling me to do. He was fearful of. So this accords with the Pashas Inyan of the Tzomoh Nafshi they were explaining here. First of all, it's impossible to say that living outside Yisrael is like a person has no God, no Eibishter for him. The answer is, as we're talking about here, the descent of Malchus from Yitzira and Asiya into Ayin Sorim. That's the point of the Gemara. What's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz? Eretz Yisrael mechavenes neged malchus debrivid or Atzilus. Eretz Yisrael is not the level we speak about in this pasuk in Tzomoh Nafshi and his fear of Leich Aved Avedazar, because Eretz Yisrael is lined up and is mekabel directly from the Shechina. The Shechina resides in Eretz Yisrael. What level of the Shechina is it? The Shechina of Bria, the Shechina of Atzilus. Zeh Shar Shamayim. It's a direct, lined up gates. Shar is a reference to Atzilus, to Malchus. It's a gateway, the interface between the Pnim and the Chutz, which is what Malchus is. But that's all what Eretz Yisrael. Mashen came. Chutz La'aretz me'erak Malchus Yitzir Vasiya. But in Chutz La'aretz, because of the Tzimtzum, so the Shechina descends into Yitzir and Asiya, and from there it's invested in the Ayin Sorim. That's the pshat in the Gemara. What does it mean? His galus of alikus, the way the Shechina is in Bria and Atzilus, doesn't exist is not present, is not revealed in the Ayin Sorim. What level of Malchus? Alika means Malchus. The Shechina. The weight is higher than Yitzir Nasiya. That ain't it's only from there Yitzir Nasiya that Malchus is mislabish in the Ayin Sodim, and whereas in Eretz Yisrael is makabel directly from Bria and Atzilus, and that's the pshat ein leilika. So this is exactly what we're explaining here, and it's reflected in the whole physical matzav and the words that David the Malach uses to describe his matzav in Midbar Yehuda. As he concludes, David, this is David's song, his longing. As his mislabish in the Ayin Sorim. So the Neshama cries out, Tzomoh Nafshi, Shedavk mitzad Yerid Yitzir Vasiya. It's Davk as Malchus descends to Yitzir and Asiya, and from there, Lislabish Ba'ayin Sorim, to be invested in Golus Mamish B'Yosef Midbar Yehuda. So from there, Davk and this Eirid Bitzim by Gadol, that's where the great thirst is aroused. Like a person is going in a desolate and thirsty place, Mokim she'ein shom mayim, where there's no water, she'oz yisavel lehem ma'id. Then he desires waters very much. But waters is plural. That's why yisavel lehem mayim. K'mayim marazal ein edoim mishi yesh lepas b'saloi. You can't compare someone who has bread in his basket, even though he's hungry, the yoserov. When he's hungry, the misha only pas besala. Someone who doesn't have bread in his basket. It's a Gemara in Yuma that the person that was sent, the Ish Iti, who was sent on Yom Kippur to bring the Soil Azazel to the Azazel. So at every station along the way, it was 10 mil. Every station there was food and drink, and they told him, if you need, eat and drink. It never happened that he did. No one ever required it. And why? This is the reason. Because the fact that one could, so that abates the desire. Where a person, however, is in a midbar, but there's no water, so bread or water, so he's very, very hungry. So likewise, David by Midbar Yehuda, because he's in Midbar Yehuda, Tzomoh Nafshi b'Yosef l'kir v'savaya, his soul thirsts exceedingly to be close to Hashem. Because a great thirst and longing and desire is only in a place of great distance. So likewise, the Malchus. So likewise, the same inyan is the descent of Malchus, which is David's level. Embodies Neshamas Yisrael. Litzira Vasiya, as Malchus, David the Melech's level descends, first Yitzira Vasiya, and from there, Lislabish Ba'ayin Sorim Midbar Yehuda, and then he descends to Midbar Yehuda, Shedavke Shom Nasa Etzla, Tshuk, Vatzemoin, Davke, then the Neshama has this longing. Shaloi Be'erech, incomparable to the longing of Mamad Matzav Beyosa Bebriya Batzilus, but there's also a longing for attachment. But incomparable in Bria and Tzilus, well, Likus is revealed to the way it is, Dafke and Yitzir and Asiya, as Malchus from there descends into the Ein Sof. And the Neshama Pasha descends into the Guf, Elam Haza in Golus. Clear? A lot of words, but it's overall a simple idea. Yesh the Kash is a Maime Bebichel Anal. We connect this to another teaching, another Maimer in this Bichel of Beguf Ksavia, Koch Metzemach Tzedek. So most of it he said is the Maitik, but there's also some folios, there's some pages from Metzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe says it was just redeemed from Shivya these days. Yeah, either it came from Russia or someone had it and gave it to the Rebbe. Like the Rashak, I mean, or whoever. Okay, we shouldn't say we don't know, but for the Rebbe, it was Mama's Pidgin Shvui. Kind of a foretaste of ha'tevus, what it means for the Svarim to be in Golos. Although no one could possibly have imagined it to be ha'tevus. Pirish HaKosov, so there that Tzemach Tzedek explains the Pasuk and the Medrash as follows. The Pasuk says in Tilim, Teive Yosher Havaya. God is good and Yosher upright, but straight, literally just. Alkin Yerech Hatoim Badorech, he shows the sinners the way to tshuva. So the question implied is, if it's good, you don't need Yosher. If it's Yosher, you don't need good. What's Teive Yosher? Shomer Chazal, so the Medrash says, and I just, I'm going to read you the Medrash because he doesn't bring it's in the Geya. It's in the Geya to know the whole Medrash because it's going to be like a diuk and different two girses. I sent it, not where I took a picture of the Medrash. Here it is. So friends, the Medrash reads as follows. Famous Medrash quoted in Chassidus frequently, especially in Rebbe's Memoriam. They asked wisdom. What's on this pasuk? Yeah, the Taka the Shel Lama Toiv Shu Yosha V'Lama Yoshra Shu Toiv. Why do you need good if he's straight, and why do you need straight if he's good? One is enough. Seems to be the Shaila. I'm not sure we'll see how the answer is the question. Upon him, here's the ik of the Medrash. Rebbe doesn't bring the Shaila for us. So it's not Negeya, the Shaila of the Medrash. But the Medrash is as follows. They asked Chochma, the Hest. Shalu the Chochma, they asked Chochma, the sinner, Ma Onshe. What can the sinner do? What's his punishment? Omar lo, he said, Omar lahem, they asked. Who is the they? Akoponim, so Chochma answers, Chatoyim tirdifra. Sin is pursued by evil. That's going to be the result of sin. Shalul and Nevuah, they ask prophecy. Chaytim ba'onshe. What's the consequence? What's the sin of the sinner? Nevuah answers, HaNefesh HaChita Asitomos. The sinful soul should die. Shalul the Torah, Chaytim ba'onshe. Then they ask Torah. So Torah said, Yovi Osham v'yischapal, you should bring a guilt offering and be atoned. Sholu l'akadosh baruch ha'chaytem ha'onshoy. And then they asked the Eibush, the sinner, what is his punishment? The Eibush said, Omalehem, Yasit tshuva v'yischapaloi. Let him do tshuva and be atoned. So this is the pshat. Toiv v'yosher Hashem, Alkin Yerech Hatoim Badorech, that the Eibush shows the sinner a way, they should do tshuva. That somehow answers the Toiv Yosher. Okay, whatever the pshat. Akoponim, so let's see now the Maim. you have to know is that there are 4 levels here that the Medrash says, going higher and higher, as it were, in getting the response. First, Chochmah, then the Nevuah, then Torah, and then the Eibishter. So according to the Maimer, so the Tzemach Tzedek, so he's saying the Tzemach Tzedek in that Bichon. No. So there's a Maimer, there's another Maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek in that Bichon. The Rebbe is Mekashe. So yes, the Kasha, what we learned just now, the Tzomoh Nafshi in the Midbar Yehuda, with another Maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek on this Posuk Medrash. So the Medrash, it's Shram Chazal, is brought down in Yalkut in Yerushalmi. Sholu lechochma nefesh achitas. So they ask Chochma, the sinful soul, bameh. So that's more the lashon of Yerushalmi. Bameh tischaper. The Medrash is what's the punishment, but the Gemara seems is bameh tischaper. How does the person find atonement? And then Sholu Nevuah, and then they ask Nevuah, and you heard the answers. So the Seder is the regular Seder. The regular Girsa is again Chochma, Torah, Chochma, Nevuah, Torah, and HaKadosh Baruch. So Mavayah, so the Tzemach Tzedek explains. It's going Belamata Lamayla. Yeah, definitely. So Chochma, Hainu Chochma Tatorah. Chochma is the lower level of Chochma. But Nevuah is Benetzach V'Hoid. Nevuah is higher, Chochma Tatorah, the next Olam, whether it's Bria, L'Chayra. And Nevuah is Netzach V'Hoid. And so it continues then to Torah, and then finally HaKadosh Baruch. Torah is Tiferes, Neighbor is Keser. But now in the square brackets, let's try and understand that. Just glanced at it. That's a Tzedek is explaining the Seder in Yonim according to the regular Giris Shapos, Kanef Shachitas, Hitomos. So we said, who answered that? Chochma answered that. Nevuah said that Eve will pursue it. Yeah. So the regular gear says that who says that Tomos and Magabe Nevuah, meaning Hainu Shanavuah ain't a soivo lahipach yesim chachma. Nevuah cannot bear, is not more tolerant than Chachma. Chachma said what? Evil will pursue it. And Nevuah, just give me 100% sure. Yeah. Chachma said, Chatoim tir deivra. And Nevuah said, Thomas, less tolerance. Nevuah has less tolerance than Chachma. So that's the way, that's the regular Girsa. There is a Shlavai, there is a Shlavai Gam Lefia Girsa. You can also explain the other Girsa. Shachachma Amra Nefesh Achitasi Thomas. That Chachma said death. So now Girsa Chachma doesn't say death. It just says that evil will pursue the person. But we can explain that also that Chachma says zero tolerance. Zero. Here we have, our Girsa says that Nevuah has less tolerance than Chachma, but we have a Girsa that Chachma has a zero tolerance. And now to explain why. According to that Girsa, it's Nevuah that says, according to that Girsa, Nevuah would say that but he's zeroing in on why would Chachma say Thomas? Ki Chachma tato she sviris hamalchus. What's the low level Chachma? That's Malchus out of 22. Okay, see these places.
Yeah, like the end of 21. Meeting.
But that's a 2 years.
They have, regardless, there's a certain tzad shava between them. But there's a certain common denominator. They're both never going to veer away. There's both punishment for the sinner.
No, they're just saying there that they're just telling us that there's two girsas. Where do we find in Chassidus the two girsas brought? That's what he wants to know to 21. So now he's going to explain why, according to the second girsa, Torah answers not as we have it. Yovi Osham Yischapeloi, but Torah says death. I'm sorry, Chachma, not Torah, Chachma. Our girsa, I'm sorry. Our girsa is Chachma, it's the first level. Chatoim Tirdifra. And according to this girsa, it has it the other way, and it has that Chachma is saying zero tolerance. To explain why. The Seder in Yonim is the Seder in Yonim is how we go. We end up by the Eibishter gives a complete. Okay, he breaks the pattern. But the Seder is that just look at it in terms of the tolerance of the opening, the hope for the sinner. So the first level, this is the regular girsa. Chachma, not much hope. You know, you sinned, that's it. You've invited evil. Expect it coming. Nevuah, less tolerance, Thomas. But then Torah doesn't actually go there because Torah gives a way out. Yovi Osham Yischapeloi. So it's Torah already that the break happens, and the Eibishter goes even further and says that's tshuva. That's the regular girsa.
That's like we've seen it in other ones.
Yeah, that's the regular girsa. Yeah. So Sholol Chachma again, that Chayte we're going levels higher. So the lower level has more tolerance in Pashtus, right? The Chiddush is that Torah is higher, the Torah gives an opening, and the Eibishter high still, tshuva. But till then, the Seder is Milamata Lamaila, so surely the lower levels are more tolerant to evil because they're lower dargas. The higher levels are less tolerant. That's Api Seder. That's why in the regular Girsa, Chachma says not death, but bad news, Tirdifra, and Nevuah, which is higher than Chachma in Pashtus. Nevuah is higher than Chachma. Chachma is wisdom. Nevuah is already something godly. So the Nevuah says, sorry, Thomas. Then Torah, what are you getting? A change, there's an opening, there's a korban, Eibishter tshuva. Good, that's verstandig. Now, but the other Girsa, that I assume has it in the reverse, that says that what? That even Chachma, death. I'm not sure according to this Girsa, what does? Is it just simply reverse? And the Vor says, Tirdifra, then that wouldn't fit in what we just said now, less tolerance. So I don't know what that second Girsa exactly how it does it. He's going to explain that anyway. That's all we can tell you is he's going to explain why, even according to the second Girsa, that Chachma is completely intolerant. Why? Because Chachma, Tatoi, she's Firisam Malchus, Yana Kabbalah Soil. Chachma, the low level of Chachma, which is Malchus, as the word Malchus implies, Kabbalah Soil. Chain Omra, Shenefesh Achitas Thomas. Kabbalah Soil says, you break death. Why is that? Because every sin, it doesn't just cut a person off from the expression, from any gilui, an expression of his life force, but any sin actually touches the etzem, the kudas achayis. There's no life afterwards. Can't be life. What's the beer? So he's saying from the perspective of a Kabbalah Soil, Maisa B'Poel, there is zero tolerance for deviance. The famous Gemara, the man the machva b'mocha kamemalcha, to make a wink, just a small gesture. in the presence of the king is considered to be rebellion. In the presence of the king, one has to be completely and absolutely focused. He's gesturing to somebody else. He's just having a sign language, telling him something. Conversation through a gesture. That's Mrida b'malchus. Because a sin is opposite to God's will. When it comes to will, it doesn't matter if asking a big thing or a small thing. You violate the will, so you violated the will. If you violated the king's will, then you don't have a king. And whatever, any sin, moves, when you don't have a king. The king is total. The contrary of Kabbalah, which is according to this girsa, that Chachma means, the lower level of Chachma means Kabbalah's oil. Kabbalah's oil, there's no letting up. It's pretty severe, but that's the nature of Kabbalah's oil. You have a king, there's no room for 99%. I'm 99% the king's subject. For 1% are reserved for me. He's no king. Kabbalah's oil is total or nothing. It's all or nothing. So therefore, he says, you can explain even according to that girsa, that Chachma which we would think Chachma wouldn't have such a zero tolerance, but he's explaining what level of Chachma we're talking about, not Chachma, just to explain it further. Stam Chachma, on the contrary, Seichel can always justify. Seichel can justify zero tolerance, without Chachma. So you'd be Masber, according to this girsa, yeah. Because what Chachma do you mean? You mean Chachma Tata, the low level. What's that? That's Kabbalah soil. We don't mean classic logic, rationale, which can find some excuse. And from the, not only that, but the perspective of Chachma, not every sin is the same. There's sins that are Chayiv Misa, there are sins that Malchus, and there's Makas Mardus, and there's some failure to do mitzvahs that there's no Einish at all. That's Mitzat Chachma. Chachma is Beriru, Chachma is discerning. How could you say Mitzat Chachma, any sin out, according to that girsa? According to the first girsa, we're talking you through. Tira Deifra, evil will pursue you if you sin. Big sin, more evil. Less sin, less evil. There's wiggle room. According to this girsa, Chachma is saying every sin is Tzomoh. Why? Because this is what? We don't mean Chachma classic, we mean Chachma, Kabbalah soil. And Kabbalah soil is a question of do you have a king, the yoke or not? You can't have the yoke 90% of the time. You don't have the yoke then. So any transgression in the Ratzon, because he says it's in the Ratzon, the will is the same. The king asks you, bring me a glass of water, or fight a battle, some extraordinary feat on behalf of the state. So the Ratzon is the same thing. In terms of the damage, it's not the same. You didn't bring the water, you let the enemy through the front gates. Big difference in damage. But inside the etzem, the kudus achayis, the words the Ratzon, the same thing. The king asks you, ignored it. Ignore is ignore. Ignore a big thing, a small thing. That's where the Chachma component. But the etzem, the kudus achayis, the Kabbalah's el component, you can ignore what the king is saying. Makes a difference what it is. So that touches etzem and the kudus achayis, closed brackets. So that will explain that even Chachma has zero tolerance. We mean what Chachma Kabbalah say. Clear? According to the regular girsa, Chachma does have tolerance, because we don't mean Kabbalah's el mamish. We mean Chachma more in its classical sense, where there's a differentiation between one transgression and another, and evil will pursue you. What kind of evil? Depending on how terrible the damage. Clear? Okay. Adkan. It's all in square brackets. But he wants to get to the mile of tshuva. Yeah? Mamshech levaye Divri Medrash, so the Tzemach goes on to explain the Medrash going higher. So we dealt now with Chachma and Nevuah. Now Sholu the Torah va'amra Torah said Yavi Oshav Yischap. This is again the girsa in Rishalmi. Bring a korban Oshav, a guilt offering, and it'll be atoned. Chali always had a shaila that that's a very narrow solution. Korban Oshav is only for 2 Avedas. What about all the other Vedas? Kapanim, weiß ich nicht. Sholo LaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then they asked the Eibishter, upping the ante. So explain it to Tzemach Tzedek. We're going, we're going from lamata lamayla. Chachma is chachma tata. Nevuah is netzach and hoid, you said before. Now we're going to Torah. What's Torah? Tiferes. V'omra yavi osham she'inyan hakorban. He's explaining, we don't just mean the guilt offering, the specifically the inyan of korbanos. Shekol korban min ha-beheimu l'shem havaya. The pasuk says, reich l'chech la-havaya. And what's havaya? You give off, kis midas harachamim, tiferes. So we're going higher. Shola l'kodesh baruch hu, the Holy One blessed be. What's that? Koil of keser. That's the level of keser. Ke'eraisa michachma ilah nafkes. Torah comes from not stam chachma, which was the first level, but the higher level, chachma ilah. That's Torah. Torah comes from chachma ilah. Still a madrega, which is tiferes. Ava b'tshuva nemar, but tshuva is beyond tiferes, it's keser. It's beyond chachma ilah, which is not explaining how it's connected to tiferes, but they're both in the center of the spheres. Ava b'tshuva nemar, but tshuva it's ki ha-mitzvah azo yisashar noichi mitzav chayah. This mitzvah which I command today, which is a reference to tshuva, Shilukot Torah. Shal yod, so who's commanding that? Anoichi. Shal yod anasis amshacha ma'keser. Here is the highest revelation connecting to the highest level, the level of keser, v'zer shakadosh baruch hu. That's why the Eibush is responding and says tshuva, because keser is l'mayla michachma, which is Torah. Tiferes, Torah, chachmilah. And the Eibush says, Oma yasa tshuva yischapelei. Clear? Okay, so in summary, the first level of Chachma is Chachma Tata. Overall, it's Malchus, which said, according to the regular Girsa, expect trouble. Sorry, you invited it, it's coming. Nevuah, Netzach, and Hoid says death. Torah, then comes Torah. Torah said, which is Chachma Ilah / Tiferes, says bring a korban. The Eibush, which is Keser, Haid, and Shem Havaya, says do tshuva. Yeah, that's the summary. Yes. Mamshech b'maymer b'binyan hakorban. That the Tzedek explains about the korban. She'afim im al yidei achet poigim b'bechinas Adam. Even if a person through a chet, he blemishes the level of the Adam Elyon. So that's the mile of the korban, that the behem is a higher shirish than the level of Adam. That's all. The lower something is the higher shirish. Shamayla bekinas Adam. Give him b'des harachamim. Shalamayla maseichel, and it arouses. They give him b'des harachamim, which is higher than the 10 sviras, which is Adam, higher than seichel. Bekinas erech hapayim, and that's Hashem's long, slow to anger. That's where the tshuva, where the korban reaches, the korban reaches, and at a chapayim is begematria korban. Now, that's a stidder, because he's saying, we just said the Eibush is the level of higher than Ishtar Shalus. And now he says korban is. Yeah? Yeah? He's going to answer the question right now. Well, Moishe, by giving more elaboration in korban, we're left with the question. So the korban is mamshich from giving b'des harachamim. That's higher than the level of Adam, higher than the 10 sviras, away from clearly higher than Ishtar Shalus. So is that not what the keser, what tshuva is? He says there's 2 levels. That's what we said before, that keser is higher than Torah. And Torah says sha'amara yavi korban. Torah says korban. Now we just said that korban is oila to where? The higher than Ishtar Shalus. But the chayre, that keser is only, that's what the Eibush invokes, not korbanos, which is what Torah's answer was. Because it's 2 levels. Torah gets to a level of keser, but the lower level of keser is God slow to anger. It's like a tremendous level which is tolerant and allows for cleansing. Erech hapayim, and the words erech hapayim, as he said before, is begimatria korban. But that's chitzonius hakeser. Tshuva in keser itself, nagas b'chinas atik, the very essence of keser, pnimius hakeser, which is higher than slow to anger, but no anger at all. Pnimius hakeser, from where the real and true cleansing happens. Okay, we'll revisit this tomorrow as he continues the closer inyan. It's not the pratim, much as we get. The general idea we do get, and we'll have to give the general idea again tomorrow in summary.